Welcome to the second of the two audio recordings on the lectures on organized interest in the state of Texas. So in the first recording, we discussed various types of interest groups, what they are and how they work. And in this second part, we will discuss how exactly they work from day to day that constitute or substantiate the criticisms that they face. So how exactly does money flow from lobbying firms or interest groups to policymakers? There are three main ways that this happens. First way is campaign contributions, secondly revolving door jobs, and thirdly leadership PACs. Campaign contributions, these are simply the money that's collected by organized interests or lobbying firms by their members and then funneled into the election campaigns of some elected officials or political parties. So they donate money to one of two types of campaign support organizations called PACs and super PACs. PACs stand for Political Action Committees, and these are organizations that are allowed to collect and spend only limited sums of money, but they can only use these monies for support. But they can use these monies to support a candidate or party directly. On the other side, super PACs are those campaign support organizations that can collect and spend unlimited sums of money, but they can only use those monies for supporting campaigns of particular individuals or parties in an indirect fashion only. This is why in election years, we see TV commercials that talk about a particular candidate, and then at the very end, it either says, I am candidate XYZ and I support this message, which is a disclaimer that says that that organization is a PAC, because that means that that PAC is directly supporting that organization. There's a very direct and organic link between that PAC and that particular political candidate. Or the ad ends with a message that says that this organization is not directly linked to the XYZ political campaign, in which case they actually position themselves as super PACs. So lobbyists use one of these two types, actually both of these organizations, to support elections of individual elected officials. That's the one main way that they influence policy making. A second major way is revolving door jobs, and these are very lucrative jobs offered by organized interests or lobbying firms to a sitting politician or his staff or his or her family. So what the policymaker does, let's say a congressman or woman, does is that he or she receives a job offer that pays him 3 or 4 times his own current salary as a policymaker, as a congressman, to work for this lobbying firm for a few years. And so he does not run in the next elections, and he starts working for this lobbying firm for a few years, and then in the elections that follow, he runs again, and if he wins, then he goes back to the public service. So it's this relationship between lobbying firms and policymakers where people go back and forth between the two is what we mean when we say revolving door jobs. And the same thing can be offered for the staff of these policymakers as well, because they are considered to be the doorkeepers for important policymakers, which has a lot of value for the lobbying firms. Or sometimes lobbying firms also provide these jobs or offer these jobs to the immediate family of the incumbent politicians. Average salary increase from the last year in Congress to the last year in lobbying was a whopping 1,452% in 2018 in the United States. So 1,452% increase in salary when one person quits his job at the Congress, or not quits, but doesn't run, so his term expires, he doesn't run in the next election, and he joins a lobbying firm, and he would be increasing his income by 1,400%. Predictably, a good chunk of the congressmen and women are actually registering as lobbyists after they retire as well. When we look at the historical trajectory of the percentage of Congress people who retire and then join a lobbying firm, we see that nearly 60% of the members of the Senate become lobbyists, and nearly 40% of the representatives become lobbyists after they retire. And this last figure is 2012 in this data, so these numbers would have been even higher given the historical trajectory of these two graphs. Same thing applies to the staff of the elected leaders as well. So legislative aides, people who work for these elected officials who end up becoming lobbyists, they are in the 52% range, or they were in year 2013, which given the trajectory would be somewhat higher today. And for the Republican Party aides, and they were in 45% range for the Democratic Party aides in year 2013. So these two statistics in the last two slides are quite instructive for us to think about the corruptive power of lobbying in Washington, D.C. today, as well as other states as well, such as Texas state that we're discussing in this lecture. Leadership PACs are the third form that money is funneled into elected leaders in our politics today. So these are political action committees established by some congressional leaders to support their parties or some party members' campaigns for certain secondary spending. So there are certain limits as to where these monies can be spent, but there are for those areas that the money can be spent, there is no limit as to how much money can be spent. So as a result, a number of lobbying firms are simply funding these leadership PACs to look favorable in the eyes of elected officials so that they adopt policies favorable to these lobbying firms' clients' interests. In this slide, there's a 60 minutes video that discusses the ways that money influences political leaders in our national government today. It is a very, very thought-provoking and incredibly instructive video. I strongly suggest you check it out as a part of your study on organized interests in the state of Texas. When we look at the state rankings, we see that, unfortunately, the state of Texas ranks pretty low on the corruption rankings, and low being bad grades. It's a highly corrupt political environment, according to various aspects of our political system. For instance, public's access to information in the political arena, state of Texas gets an F. Executive accountability, F. Judicial accountability, C. State civil service management, F. Internal auditing is good, A. And some other areas, for example, redistricting is important here, gets an F as well. Redistricting is redrawing the boundaries of congressional districts, and it's been long argued that, especially in the state of Texas, a special form of redistricting called gerrymandering has been very widespread, and gerrymandering refers to redrawing the boundaries to provide a certain electoral advantage to a particular party. which is considered to be an undemocratic tool that unfairly sways the election results towards one party over the other. So certain discussions are very important when it comes to organized interest. One major question is, should it be banned? Because lobbying and organized interest are disallowed in many other advanced democracies around the world, but in the US they are legal practices on the books. So one answer is that no, it shouldn't be, because it shouldn't be banned, because banning lobbying wouldn't end lobbying. On the contrary, it would actually turn lobbyists into even more shadowy figures that operate with no supervision or regulatory restraints, and it would be even worse. At least with the current system, it provides a transparency. We know who spends how much and who influences the policymakers how much, and we can use it to improve the society and our political system somehow. Even today, where lobbying is legal in the US, shadow lobbying is a very real and a growing practice in US politics. More and more people are becoming shadow lobbyists instead of registered lobbyists, which are people who are influencing policymakers in various forms without doing things that require them to register as lobbyists. So what's the solution? One idea is allowing interest groups but banning all money exchanges between interest groups and elected officials. So the approach here is that the problem is not with the interest groups. So James Madison and other founding fathers were too naive. They only considered interest groups as an intellectual exercise that allows flow of information from the society to the policymakers. But in practice, we see that money is what corrupts. Money is involved in this picture and it corrupts. So therefore, removing money from the picture would be a solution, according to this approach. Another solution would be allowing both interest groups to exist and also to make donations. So money would still be a part of the picture, but their lobbyist donations would go to the federal government's budget for election campaigns, and then the federal government would use that money to support election campaigns. That way, campaigns wouldn't know where the money is coming from and which interest groups or lobbying firms to return the favors to. Another idea is allowing both interest groups and money to remain the way it has been, but only allowing donations to be made in an anonymous fashion, so that the policymakers wouldn't know who to return the favor to or to whom to show their appreciation once they get elected. And the fourth and last idea is what is called the clean election system. This is a system created in the state of Maine, and now the state of Arizona adopts this as well, and is spreading rapidly. And the idea here is that this election system gives a political candidate a choice to raise money either privately from interest groups or corporations or publicly from voters. If the candidate chooses to raise money publicly from voters, then he can accept up to $5 only from each voter. So once a candidate does this and raises money from a certain, at least for a certain threshold number of voters, then the election officials recognize that candidate as a serious and legitimate candidate for the office, and then they turn around and multiply the funds that he received from small donors. This way, it's a mixture of private and public support for election campaigns that would eliminate or disallow large-scale donations which corrupt the system. In this video, you'll see an explanation of the clean election systems. Again, please make sure to check out this video. These are not supplemental resources. These are required resources as a part of this lecture for you to have a good understanding of these notions. In the last slide, we have a discussion with Jack Abramoff, who is a convicted lobbyist, one of the biggest lobbyists in the history of the United States, and he gives us some sobering thoughts as to how to reform the lobbying system. It's a must check out as well. This wraps up our discussion on organized interest in the state of Texas.